Hey there, I'm Sean Finnegan, and you are listening to Restitutio, a podcast that seeks to recover authentic Christianity and live it out today. How does your faith affect you at work? Of course, there's the classic verse about working heartily unto the Lord, but beyond working hard, how does your faith affect you at work? Today, in part 7 of our Heroes of Faith series, we're going to look at the life of Daniel. Although he was a prophet of great significance, he also worked for the government in an incredibly difficult time. By considering how he navigated the workplace, we can learn much about how to live out our faith at work. Here now is episode 625, Heroes of Faith, part 7, Daniel. This morning we're going to the book of Daniel. So this is for all the Daniels out there, especially my own son Daniel. Look at Daniel chapter 1, verse 1. It says, "In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, and some of the vessels of the house of God, and he brought them to the land of Shinar, to the house of his God, and placed the vessels in the treasury of his God." And so this was the crucial crisis of the Old Testament period when Jerusalem started getting attacked by the Babylonians and then eventually fell to the Babylonians. This great crisis of God's people. However dark you may think our times are, they're not that dark. I mean, this is really, really bad. I mean, if you have an empire slowly gobbling up territory, and you're the next one on the line, and here's little Judah, and you know the king comes and this is the first incident where he comes, and it says that he took the king. You know, it's like taking the leader of the whole country. Verse 2, the Lord gave Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand with some of the vessels of the house of God. I mean, this pagan king, this Nebuchadnezzar, came into the house of God and took the treasures, the sacred objects that were dedicated to God's worship. This pagan polytheist worshiping these other gods, he took them, and it says at the end of verse 2, he placed them in the treasury of his God. It's not like he's an atheist. He's like, oh, I don't believe in any of this. No, he believes in Marduk. He believes in the Babylonian gods. And he's like, yeah, Yahweh, let's put this in the temple of my God back home. I mean, this is just as devastating as a nation can suffer kind of a situation. Verse 3, then the king commanded Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring some of the people of Israel, both of the royal family and of the nobility, youths without blemish, of good appearance and skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge and understanding, learning, and competent to stand in the king's palace and to teach them the literature and language of the Chaldeans. So this Ashpenaz there in verse 3, he's the supervisor. He's the person that the king has put in charge of this task. What is the task? Let's train up their nobility, their quality youth, to serve me, to serve Nebuchadnezzar. And you notice the description there, right? Verse 4, youths without blemish, of good appearance, skillful in all wisdom, endowed with knowledge, understanding, learning, competent to stand in the king's palace. So the idea is Ashpenaz is supposed to identify the cream of the crop, the best of the youth. They had to have all these qualifications, and now they're going to take them out from the land of Israel and put them in the land of Babylon and put them into an intensive training course, basically a college type experience, although there's a lot less freedom in this college, if you will, because there was very little tolerance for failure. Verse 5, the king assigned them a daily portion of the food that the king ate and of the wine that he drank. In other words, that's the best. If you're getting the king's food, you're getting the best food. It's the best food in all of the empire that he is now, I'm sure from his perspective, graciously sharing with these people who really don't deserve anything. They're conquered. Their gods are puny, obviously, compared to Nebuchadnezzar. And this is a guy who later builds a golden statue to himself. I mean, this is not a humble man. It says in verse 5, the king assigned them a daily portion of the food that the king ate and of the wine that he drank. They were to be educated for 3 years, and at the end of that time, they were to stand before the king. Among these were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah of the tribe of Judah. And the chief of the eunuchs gave them names. Daniel he called Belteshazzar. I guess Daniel didn't have enough syllables in it. Hananiah he called Shadrach. Mishael he called Meshach. And Azariah he called Abednego. Now, most of us have experienced cultural shifts in our lifetimes, where you see the culture change on something. I had a funny experience a little while ago. I was at one of these men's places. I was getting a tuxedo for a wedding that I was in, and I was talking, and the guy who was doing all the measuring is an older guy, and I started asking him about the rules, because just like women, men have certain rules for our clothes, for our colors and all this, and you're not supposed to break certain rules, and if you're somebody like me, you don't have an eye for the rules, you just have to memorize them. And then try not to break them all the time. Some of you are more stylish than others, but I'm the kind that has to memorize the rules. So my mom taught me some of the rules when I was a boy. If you have black pants, you don't wear a brown belt. That's just a rule. I don't know why that is. It never bothered me, but that was one of the rules that I was taught. There are other rules like that. So another one of the rules was like, if you have black pants, you wear black shoes. Right? And if you have gray pants, you wear black shoes. Well, anyhow, this guy's fitting us for gray pants with brown shoes, which is now totally acceptable, in fact, preferred. And so I knew that changed. Did that change in your lifetime? That changed. So I'm asking this old timer, I'm like, look, what's your take on all this? Because you've been around, you've been in the business for a long time. And he's like, yeah, they changed the rule. It's just the way it is. That's an example of a very, very small example of a cultural shift. And now if you see especially light gray pants with like light brown shoes, your aesthetic sensibility will be like, ooh, nice. Whereas like so many years ago, if you saw that, you'd be like, what's going on here? And so that's an example of a cultural shift. And it's a good example of a cultural shift because it's not the sort of thing you're necessarily concerned about or aware of, but it is something that's affecting you. The sense of style that you remember when women, for example, when they would wear these jackets, they had the big shoulder pads. Do you remember that? I remember when I was a kid, these women had these huge, it was like football players, they're coming around like this, we'd be at an event like this and all the women, they'd have these big shoulder, as a kid, I loved the shoulder pads. They were so comfortable, right? That move right there. See, I would be leaning up against my mother's shoulder and she had that cushion, it was like a pillow right on her shoulder. I love that shoulder pad. Then at one time, sometime, whenever, I don't know what year, people decided we don't do shoulder pads. They're not cool. And then with the pants, right? The pants had to be baggy. When I was a kid, in the 90s especially, it's supposed to be baggy. The baggier, you're supposed to be comfortable. You're supposed to be loose, right? And then we had the MC Hammer pants. He took it to a whole nother level. It was like wearing parachutes. If he fell out of a plane, he'd be like, watch this. And then now we're the other way. It's got to be skinny. If it doesn't pinch the calf, it's not right. So these things are always changing. It's just a silly thing, fashion, right? But there are other things that are changing too. Morality, what's right and what's wrong, values and all this stuff. Can you imagine Daniel for a moment, who went through all of the culture changes in a day? And why did that happen? Because he was taken out of his land where he understood the culture and participated in the culture, wore the kind of clothes, talked the kind of language, worship the kind of God. Everything is the Israelites. And he was brought to Babylon where everything was different. Can you imagine that? Being brought to a foreign culture and everything's different. The colors they wear, the kind of clothes, the language, the gods, the way they think about the calendar. Something like the calendar would be totally different. Why? The Jewish calendar has these festivals at certain times of the year. It would be like losing Christmas like that. Like, we don't celebrate Christmas around here. I mean, how are you going to celebrate Christmas by yourself? I'm going to get myself a present, right? Not that Christmas was around at the time of Daniel. I'm just saying, like, in a modern sense, like something that's so taken for granted in our culture, right? So this is what happened for Daniel. And then for 3 years, he's in training to learn how to speak Chaldean, how to read the Babylonian language, how to understand a deep knowledge, not only of the language, but of how to run the government, because he's supposed to be an advisor. He's supposed to be somebody that can figure out problems, creative solutions to problems. So he's got to learn the history, the politics. Everything is suddenly different for this guy. Verse 8, but Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the king's food or with the wine that he drank. Therefore he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. I find this to be one of the most incredible verses in the book of Daniel, especially in verse 1, because this is the moment where Daniel says, I'm taking a stand. I'm going to do something risky. This, if you want to look for an analogy to today, this is a workplace issue. This is a workplace issue where Daniel, at his place of work, not that he's necessarily getting paid, but he's more like forced into it, but he's in this situation. He's got a supervisor. The supervisor provides the food or the lunch or whatever it is, and Daniel is got to now talk to his supervisor and say, look, I can't eat this food. And it's tough because, in the environment, they're actually being kind to him by giving him this food. And he's saying, sorry, I can't worship your crappy God. I mean, I don't think he said it that way, but he's saying, I can't because this was sacrificed, this was dedicated to your God, and it would violate my beliefs as a worshiper of Yahweh, the only true God, for me to participate in this in any way whatsoever. And so he asked his boss, right, the chief of the eunuchs, hey, could I not eat this? Maybe a modern analogy would be you're working some sort of office job and they decide it's Gay Pride Day and they hand out stickers with rainbows on them to everybody and they say you're going to wear this today and that's how you're going to fit in because everybody knows Gay Pride is a good thing. And you get the sticker and you're like, I don't believe in Gay Pride. I think gay people are God loves them, and I'm happy to love and respect somebody who has a different lifestyle and everything. But I can't wear this sticker. Can I be exempt from this? That's what Daniel's doing. He's asking in a very awkward situation, can I be exempt from eating filet mignon and fine wine? That's courage. He stuck his neck out. Verse 9, and God gave Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the chief of the eunuchs. And the chief of the eunuchs said to Daniel, I fear my lord the king, who assigned your food and your drink, for why should he see that you were in worse condition than the youths who are of your own age? So you would endanger my head with the king. Now we get to the intensity of the situation. That last little bit there, my head. So this is a workplace where people could possibly lose their head. This is a little more intense than your office job, right? Or if you're out in a trade somewhere. This is an intense situation. If the king doesn't like how this chief eunuch is handling the youth, the option is he could get executed. So work performance is really, really important. You can't get another job if you lost your head. This intensifies it to Daniel. The guy's like, look, man, I hear what you're saying. You're Jewish, whatever. You have a different custom, whatever. But if you guys don't look good and the king finds out that I made this exception for you, it's me that's going to have to suffer for this. So now what's Daniel going to do? Oh, well, it's not really that big a deal. I'll just wear the stupid sticker, I'll cross my fingers. No, that's not what he says, right? He doesn't say, I'll just pretend like I'll eat it and spit it into my napkin and put it in my pocket. He doesn't say that either. Verse 11, then Daniel said to the steward, whom the chief of the eunuchs had assigned over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, test your servants for 10 days. So that's the wisdom of God. That's the wisdom of God right there. That's like a lightning bolt from the sky into this situation. We had one option, which is eat the food. Another option, don't eat the food and get in trouble and maybe get executed. These are our two options. And from nowhere comes this, well, let's just do a test. Can we test? Can we try this out? See if this works? Test your servants for 10 days, verse 12. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. So they went keto, vegetarian, everything. The common wisdom of the time was probably like good meat equals healthy young men. Daniel's just like, well, we're going to eat vegetables. Verse 13, then let our appearance and the appearance of the youths who eat the king's food be observed by you and deal with your servants according to what you see. So he listened to them in this matter and tested them for 10 days. And at the end of 10 days, it was seen that they were better in appearance and fatter in flesh. That's a compliment in their culture, okay? Than all the youths who ate the king's food. So the steward took away their food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables. This right here, this moment between Daniel and his supervisor, this established credibility. And let me tell you something. If you want to see revival in your own life, especially in your neighborhood, with people that live near you, or in your workplace, you need to have credibility. They need to recognize that there's a credibility. There's something there, that you're not just a weirdo, a slacker, a jerk, whatever, in the workplace, right? You need to have some sort of credibility. Oh, yeah, Dan, he works hard. I could listen to what he has to say. Look at verse 17. As for these four youths, God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom, and Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. Just look at that for a second. This is God's side. Okay, on Daniel's side, Daniel said, you know what, this is awkward, this is difficult, this is a controversial thing to ask, but could I not eat that food? I would like to not eat that food because I don't want to defile myself with food that's been sacrificed to other gods. He sticks his neck out in the workplace. And then this moment here, and probably vegetables were going to make him look healthier anyhow. I don't know necessarily if God did anything there. It doesn't say. But then in verse 17, here God steps in. It says God gave them learning and skill in all literature and wisdom. And Daniel had understanding in all visions and dreams. So Daniel stuck his neck out. Daniel was faithful to God. And then what did God do? God was faithful to Daniel. God gave Daniel the thing he needed much more than a special diet. What did Daniel need? He needed to ace his tests. He needed to get through this program. He needed to be able to speak the language, to be able to have wisdom, know what to do when they ask him these hard questions. It says in Romans 12:2, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. The moment it says don't be conformed to this world, it means that you are the fish going the opposite way as everybody else. Because the world is going a certain direction, and Daniel says, I'm going this way. And I'm doing it not because I'm trying to be a nonconformist and cool or something. I'm doing it because God's over here, and I'm trying to be with God. And God says, you know what? I'm going to take care of you guys. God backed him up. Maybe another analogy would be at your workplace, they want you to work on Sunday. And it's understood that you all have to work on Sunday. If you don't work on Sunday, you're never going to get ahead. You're never going to prove to the boss that you're excellent and dependable and willing to do whatever it takes. So maybe you stick your neck out and say, look, I I don't mind working extra hours. I don't mind working extra hard. I don't mind doing the jobs that other people don't want to do, but just give me Sunday so I can worship the Lord. I mean, that maybe would be a similar kind of situation we would go through. And it says in verse 18, at the end of the time when the king had commanded that they should be brought in, the chief of the eunuchs brought them in before Nebuchadnezzar. This is the moment of truth, when they go before the king. And now the chief supervisor there, if these guys do well, he's going to be rewarded. And if they look weird or they don't make sense or they go Braveheart on the king and try to kill him or something, or any of those kinds of scenarios, that dead. So this is the moment of truth for Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, those four, but also for the supervisor. And the king is just sitting easy. He's like, yeah, bring in some more. Let's see. Let me ask them a stumper. So if this country attacks and it's in this time of the year, what do you think we should do? How should we do it? He's asking him questions about how to run things. Look what it says here, 19. And the king spoke with them, and among all of them was found none like Daniel. So you have all these different people from, Babylon conquered a lot of places. Judah is just one of the places. There was none found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. Therefore they stood before the king. And in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king inquired of them, all his stumper questions, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters that were in all his kingdom. And Daniel was there until the first year of King Cyrus. Translation, Daniel was there forever. Decade after decade, regime change after regime change, Daniel's still there. And, we don't really have the time to get into explaining how it all works, but because of Daniel's courageous, faithful stand and what God was able to do through Daniel, we had a Nehemiah centuries later. Because of Daniel paving the way and his performance on the job, that ultimately Nebuchadnezzar said, at the end of the days, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my reason returned to me, and I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. A lot of stuff happened before this verse that we didn't read. But my point is sometime after Daniel's faithful service, not only his supervisor, but the CEO, Nebuchadnezzar himself, the top dog, says, you know what? Daniel's God is a God that I want to bless, is a God that I want to praise, is a God that I think really is actually in charge of things down here. Whoa. That's incredible. Talk about influence. How did that happen? It's because it started right here with one decision where Daniel said, I can't eat this meat. And I'm going to stand up for what God says is right in my life, and I'm going to face whatever consequences come my way. I'm going to stand here. And then what did God do? God backed him up. God hooked him up. He was healthy, and he was smart, and he was able to answer. And you can be healthy and smart. We put you in the spotlight, and you might lose it. Daniel didn't lose it in the spotlight either. Daniel was able to say, oh yeah, that's a good question, King, but have you thought about these 3 other possibilities? He was 10 times better than everybody else. Where did that come from? God gave him a boost. Let me tell you, if you're in college, a boost from God isn't a bad thing. And if you're in the workplace and you're dealing with difficult, complicated situations like so many of us are, whatever kind of work you're doing, there's always complications that arise, right? We need creativity. We need problem solving. We need perseverance and integrity and tenacity and these kinds of things that God can help us with to have a testimony, to have credibility, and ultimately to have an influence. Let's look at another example from Daniel chapter 6. Same Daniel, new king. New hotshot, new CEO. So I guess if I'm going to continue with my work analogy, this would be like after a merger. Which it kind of was. It kind of was. The Babylonian Empire was sort of like subsumed by the Medes and the Persian Empire. Acquisition, yes. It was acquired. Thank you. It's always good to have an HR person when you're using work analogies in church. I think this is so important for us because this isn't the 1950s anymore in this country. Christianity doesn't have this unquestioned position in our society, in our institutions. It doesn't have that. In fact, there's a lot of antagonism. And I know it varies regionally, depends on who you talk to and who you're hanging out with. But when you're in an antagonistic culture, a culture that's antagonistic to your faith, Daniel is a good person to look at. Right? Because Daniel is only surrounded by a totally antagonistic culture to his faith. And he could show us the way. How do I act as a godly person in a dark time or in a confusing time or in a time that doesn't agree with my assumptions or my beliefs? And so this is another great incident here. Daniel 6, it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be throughout the whole kingdom. These are basically what we would call governors. The provinces would be like states within the empire. And satrap would be a governor, the person who manages that province. And over them, 3 high officials, of whom Daniel was one. Whoa, that's power. That's a powerful position, right? So you have the different states, and then you have the governors of the states, and then above them, he puts 3 others that are in charge of all of them, and Daniel's one of those 3. This is a serious position of influence. To whom the satraps would give account so the king might suffer no loss. Verse 3, then this Daniel became distinguished above all of the other officials and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom. Just when you think Daniel couldn't get any higher, the king's like, you're just so good at your job, Daniel. Let me just elevate you some more, and let's just put you a little higher. Why don't you just run everything? Just tell me what's going on. So, I don't know, what would that be? Vice president in a company? Chief operating officer? I don't know. So, that's Daniel's position at this point. Look at verse 4. Then the high officials and the satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom. But they could not find ground for a complaint or any fault because he was faithful. And no error or fault. This just reminds me so much of the workplace, right? Like here you have somebody that gets promoted. And all the others, instead of like, oh yeah, Daniel's promoted again. Here's a cake. Stick it in his face, right? I mean, they're so jealous. They hate his guts. They don't want Daniel to be in charge. They want to be in charge. What about me? Why does he get the nice parking spot? Right? And so what they try to do is they're like, okay, all right, let's work together. We'll find something on him. We'll find some dirt on Daniel. We'll find some way to expose. I mean, nobody lives and works this long in these administrations and doesn't have some enemies and doesn't have some skeletons in their closet. We'll work together. We'll dig it up. We'll dig it up, and then we'll find it, and then we'll report it to the king, and then he'll be disgraced. Then I guess one of us will have to get promoted to his spot. So it's amazing. People are the same, right? I mean, we're not wearing those robes, and we're not living in the middle of the desert, but this is the same thing that we see in our workplaces today. But it says that they could find no ground, verse 4, for complaint or any fault because he was faithful. You want to have credibility, you want to have revival, you want to have influence in your workplace, you be faithful. You show up, you do your job, you be faithful. You be like Daniel. It's a good reminder for all of us. It's easy for us to cut corners, especially when so many people are working from home. And, are you really working as hard as normal? Are you really working as many hours as your report? It's easy, right? There's nobody to see you. So it's easy to cheat and take a 3-hour lunch instead of a half-hour lunch. You could do a lot of it, but not if you want to be like Daniel, not if you want to have credibility and influence and be able to have revival that not just is inside you, but spills out to those outside of you. That's what I see here. Daniel kept his nose clean. He didn't bend the rules. He wasn't crooked. Look at verse 5. These men said, "We shall not find any ground for complaint against this Daniel, unless we find it in connection with the law of his God." Boy, that's a testimony too, isn't it? It's like the only way we're going to find something on this guy is if something to do with his faith, something to do with his practice, his worship. That's almost like a backhanded compliment. Verse 6, then these high officials, the satraps, came by agreement to the king and said to him, "O King Darius, live forever." That's like the standard hello to the boss. "Boss, your tie looks so nice today," or whatever. Or "Your shoulder pads look so nice." All the high officials, verse 7, of the kingdom, the prefects, the satraps, the counselors, and the governors are agreed. So like basically we all agreed, all your management together has agreed, that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction that whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document so that it cannot be changed according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the document and injunction. They found nothing on him in the workplace, so they got something on him related to his faith. And that can happen to us today. That can happen easily to us today. If they're going to find some way to persecute you, it's probably, hopefully, not going to be because you stink at your job. You know, if your neighbors hate your guts, I hope it's not because you're the slacker that lets all the leaves go onto their lawn before you do it. That's not a good reason to be hated. If you're hated for the name of Christ, tell me and let's rejoice together. Jesus said, leap for joy in those days. But if people don't like you because you're just a weirdo, you don't get credit for that. If you're weird for Christ, yes, you get credit for that. But if you're just picking your nose and eating it at your cubicle, like, come on, man. Don't do that. It says in 2 Timothy 3:12, indeed, all who desire to live a godly life in Christ will be persecuted. That's a troubling verse. I think most of us are wired so that we want whoever it is we happen to be with to like us. There are some of us that are special in that regard and really just don't care at all. But I think generally most people, especially in the workplace, they just want other people to like them, right? But this says that if you desire to live a godly life in Christ, let's just get a show of hands. Anybody want to live a godly life in Christ? Does that sound good to you? That's what I want to do. I want to live a godly life in Christ. Some of you are like, I know the rest of the verse. You will be persecuted. It's inevitable. It's inevitable. Look at verse 10. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he had done previously. Daniel was a man of prayer. Daily prayed he 3 times. And you know what? He knew they passed this law. He knew they were out to get him. And he decided to do it anyhow. So in the first case, with Daniel chapter 1, we saw that they wanted him to do something he couldn't do. Eat this food that was defiled, right? So he said, I can't do that. He had to ask for exemption, religious exemption from that food. Now here, in this case, it's the opposite. Daniel's not asking not to do something. Daniel is still doing something that now they don't want him to do. You see? So that's why I like these 2 chapters, to show us both sides of us. Christianity is not just about saying, I can't do that. No thanks. Well, no, not for me today. There is that aspect of it, right? But then there's also the activism of Christianity, the positive sides of it, the things that we do. We pray, we gather, we worship, we show love, generosity, and kindness to a world. And so Daniel's like, well, I'm still going to pray. I know they signed this thing. I know they're out to get me. I'm still going to pray. It says that he also had his window open, right? You see that verse 10? Let's read it again. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house where he had windows in his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He had the windows open. He didn't even hide his prayer. He had his windows open. He prayed just like he always prayed, because you can take everything else, but you can't take his relationship with God. That's the one thing that he's never going to compromise on. It reminds me of the lyrics to this song by Beautiful Eulogy. It's a song called If. It goes, "If in one unfortunate moment you took everything that I own, everything you've given from heaven above and everything that I've ever known, if you stripped away my ministry, my influence, my reputation, my health, my happiness, my friends, my pride, and my expectation, if you caused me to suffer or to suffer for the cause of the cross, if the cost of my allegiance is prison and all my freedoms are lost, if you take the breath from my lungs and make an end of my life, if you take the most precious part of me and take my kids and my wife, it would crush me. It would break me. It would suffocate and cause heartache. I would taste the bitter, dark providence, but you would still preserve my faith. What's concealed in the heart of having is revealed in the losing of things. And I can't even begin to imagine the sting that kind of pain brings. I would never blame you for evil, even if you caused me pain. I came into this world with nothing, and when I die, it'll be the same. I will praise your name in the giving and taking away. If I have you, I could lose everything and still consider it gain." I love that last line there. If I have you, I could lose everything and still consider it gain. That's where Daniel was at. He says, all right, you want to play ball? Let's go, but you can't have my God. You can't have, I'm still going to pray to my God. I'm still going to connect with him. You can't have that. And so Daniel says, I'm going to do it. Daniel had God, and because he had God, he had enough. Pray. Be a person of prayer. And I'm not talking about just for your food. I think it's good you pray for your food, but we're talking about connecting with God as a lifeline, like this psalmist says, "Whom have I in heaven but you? And there is nothing on earth that I desire besides you. My flesh and my heart may fail, but God is the strength of my heart and my portion forever." You want a portion? You want an inheritance? God is the strength of your heart, the strength of your soul, and your portion forever. If you have that satisfaction in God, that God-centeredness in your very being, you can face the lions. Because that's what's about to happen. Daniel's not playing. Daniel has never read the book of Daniel. Daniel doesn't know that because the Lord shut the lion's mouth. He doesn't know that part of the song. He doesn't know it. He just knows that he's about to be in incredible trouble, probably executed. You know, his first day on the job, his supervisor says, well, if I don't please the king, I could lose my head. Like that's the first day on the job. You know, some people as a stunt, you know, they'll call in somebody in an office and they'll fire them to set an example to everyone else. You mess with me, this is going to happen to you. This is way worse than getting fired. A den of lions. Has anyone ever touched a lion? I hope not. There was like, oh, well, Cousin Joe touched a lion once and he's not with us anymore, you know. Yeah, we don't play with lions, right? I don't even touch cats, to be honest. But lions are fierce cats. Let's continue. Verse 10. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed. Oh, I just love that part. He knew it. He went to his house where he had his windows and his upper chamber open toward Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as he had done previously. Then these men came by agreement and found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. Then they came near and said, see, they could even hear him. They found him. They busted him. It wasn't even hard. O king, did you not sign an injunction that anyone who petitions to any god or man within 30 days except you, and yada, 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 they go through the whole thing. They say, "Oh, king, didn't you sign this law?" "Yes, you did. We've got your signature right here. Right there is your seal of approval. King, I know Daniel's your favorite, but the law of the Medes and the Persians can never be altered." That's like our slogan around here. The king is forced to throw Daniel into the lion's den. He puts him in the lion, and the king is so disturbed. He loves Daniel. Daniel's his best worker. He does not want to throw him to the lion's den. But he tries as hard as he can all night. The king is trying to find, he gets the lawyers out. Right? It's funny that this is so relevant to us. He gets the lawyer. It's like, surely there's some loophole. And he's all day long, he's trying to find a loophole. And he can't find one. He has to throw him in the den. And then all that night, the king can't sleep. He's up all night. And then in the morning, he comes back. And he rushes there because he didn't sleep anyhow. And he comes and he finds Daniel. I love the part at the end of verse 16 where the king says to Daniel, after he throws him in, he says, may your God whom you serve continually deliver you. So you're a religious guy, you've been praying to this God, may your God deliver you. And he's not saying that in a sarcastic way, like he really wants his God to deliver him. And then we get down to verse 20. As he came near to the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, "Oh, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lions?" That's the moment, right? And you could just hear the anguish in his voice. You're serving the living God. You're always talking about it. Is your God able to deliver you, Daniel? Is there going to be silence? Because if there's silence, the lions ate Daniel. Verse 21, then Daniel said to the king, hello. And how do you say hello to the CEO of the empire? O king, live forever. O king, live forever. My God has sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths. And they did not harm me, because I was found blameless before him and also before you, O king. I have done no harm. So the king, so excited, he's like, wow, this is incredible. It's like the best thing ever. So he takes Daniel out. He doesn't have to write a law for the other guys. He just grabs them and he throws them right in the den of lions. And then this is the verse we don't read in children's fellowship. Verse 24. And the king commanded those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were brought and cast into the den of lions, they, their children, and their wives. And before they reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. That verse is important for one reason. These weren't some tame lions. These weren't some well-fed lions that took like a smell of Daniel. This tells us that the lions were hungry when Daniel was in there. They were ready for him, and yet still they did not eat him. And so then we find in verse 25 that the king, once again the boss, the top dog, says, then the king wrote to all the peoples and nations and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I will make a decree that in all my royal dominion people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God. Because of the simple things, showing up, doing your job, being faithful to God, these other things that God is able to bless you and God is able to raise you up to a position in your, whatever the situation it is, so that that inner revival spills out and affects other people. Praise God. Verse 27, he delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He who has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian.
Well, that brings this message to a close. What did you think? Come on over to restitutio.org and leave your feedback on episode 625, Heroes of Faith, Daniel. Now, I wanted to take a moment to plug an upcoming event happening in March 2026 called the UCA Australian Conference. This will be the first Unitarian Christian Alliance event in Australia. It's going to take place near Sydney at a venue called Stanwell Tops on Friday to Sunday, March 27th to the 29th. And I'm just going to read you a little bit of the event information they have available. It says, inaugural Aussie residential weekend gathering of believers in one God in a modern, pleasant conference center with multiple presentations from keynote speakers on topics of relevance to Unitarians. There will also be a range of workshops to attend, along with plenty of time for fellowshipping with new and old friends. Keynote speakers include Dale Tuggy, Sean Finnegan, and others, special presentations by Mark Kane, Jeff Dybel, and others. All meals will be taken together in the conference center dining rooms. Arrangements can be made for special dietary requirements. Then they talk about carpooling and the Helensburgh City Rail Station being 15 minutes drive from the venue. And last of all, that early bird pricing is available until the 14th of December. Which saves you about $20 Australian dollars. So that's pretty sweet. Anyhow, if you are interested in coming, if you live in Australia or if you live near Australia and would be available to attend this event, I encourage you to come. I think it's going to be a great time to see other biblical Unitarians, to get answers to questions you may have, and to just enjoy the fellowship with like-minded believers. So I encourage you to consider that, especially if you live near Australia or in Australia. Obviously, it's a big country and Sydney is just one part. But, if you can make it there, it would be great to see you. I've already come into contact with quite a few people who are planning on coming, both from Australia and New Zealand and the surrounding regions. So hopefully that'll be a really wonderful time. And hopefully also we can get that recorded and put on YouTube. We will certainly try to do that, although there are no guarantees with technology, right? Because it is actually rather tricky. So come if you can make it. Otherwise, hopefully you'll be able to catch up with it on YouTube or on this podcast in a later time. I'll try to record my presentation as well. I'm hoping to get a little bit more information about the event in the future, and we'll keep you up to date as to what's happening. So very exciting. On the other side of the world, we have the event I mentioned previously in New Zealand that is going to be happening this month. And then in March, another event in the Australia area. Now, I did want to also mention there is a second event happening the week before in Melbourne, where Dale Tuggy is going to be debating Michael Bird. And so that is also an exciting event. And I think we probably have like a day where we can speak a little bit at a venue down there in Melbourne, which is a few hours south of Sydney, the weekend before. But that's not an official UCA conference. But if you do live in the Melbourne area, that would actually probably even make more sense. Or why not come to both? It'd be great to see you at both. So that's about it for today. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Stay tuned next week for our next installment in our Heroes of Faith series. If you'd like to support us, you can do that at restitutio.org. And remember, the truth has nothing to fear.